item on the consent agenda.
That would be letter A, Board of Aldermen's meeting minutes, February 9th, 2021, regular meeting minutes.
Do we have a motion to approve the item on the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Public comments. Are there any citizens here tonight who'd like to make any comments to this board about their wishes or concerns for the town?
I do. I want to start by saying thank you to everybody for the efforts that they put out last year, or last month, because I did see a substantial difference.
Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, my name is Michael Geary. I live at 217 East Somerville. I want to thank everybody for the efforts they put out. It was noticeable, and I appreciate the kids coming around. I have a couple questions. One is, the state is now investigating changing their regulations for waste management and littering. Are you going to keep up with it? Because they're looking at enhanced fines, substantially different fines. They're going from a couple $100s to a couple $1,000s in littering. So that's a proposal right now in the state. The second is, how are you going to maintain the process that went on this past month? It's nice to have it now, but we're going to have spring changeover with students and everything else going on. What's the plans? And the last question is, with that, where are we at with this neighborhood watch, with the neighborhood group collaboration? So I'm going to keep on following up until I get my answers.
Well, we appreciate that. On the item, Mr. Rodner, about what the state's doing with the fine and everything, can you follow up on all that?
I certainly would. I had not heard that, but I will fault you. Have a...
NPR, wonderful thing.
Okay. Did they give you a bill number by any chance?
No, they didn't.
I'll find it out.
Yeah, I'll have to look at it myself.
Okay.
But they really changed. They had mentioned that the plans were going from a couple $100s on major fines to a couple $1,000s on it because they felt that there wasn't enough impetus to get people to stop littering.
Okay.
Now, it may be just for state roads or state properties, but all the same,
We'll find out.
it's a state regulation.
Yep. We'll track it down and find out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the other two items that Cleary brought up, are we monitoring that anyway? I think we had some major pickups in some neighborhoods.
There have been 2 pickups, and it's quite likely there will be additional pickups over the next couple months. We are working on the language in our code. Take a look at that to figure out what we need to do to give us a little bit more impact locally, and how that gets applied. So we are working on the regulatory end of it as well. I'm glad to hear what, as I said, the state is looking at it as well, so we'll follow up on both of those still.
And I think I had mentioned to Mrs. Sharp about University Drive in Westbrook. I think the Elon Exchange Club at one time had adopted one of those roads. I thought it was Westbrook. But when I ride by there now, I don't see the sign that says adopted by.
I can check on the adopted highway.
Yeah, check on that.
And the last point you raised on the neighborhood coalition, the last conversation we had with the university probably 2 weeks ago was they were figuring out how to restart that process in this manner, trying to get people into a Zoom Zoom meeting for that coalition. I will check with them and find out. That was a process that they had initiated.
Is that they who?
They being the university.
Okay.
They came to us and we said, this sounds like a great idea, and they put it together. It stopped last spring with everything.
Yeah, it just kind of died.
Yeah.
It would be great to get the Greeks in because a lot of the neighborhoods are turning into Greek houses now. Of course, 50% of the population in Elon's Greek, so it's kind of hard to avoid that, but they're turning into, well, most campuses don't allow Greek houses off-site, but at Elon, you really don't have a choice. So it's one of the things that would be nice to have the university involved and bring their Greek organizations into it.
Well, can they have Greek housing off campus officially without the consent of the university? No.
Well,
If they're doing
I can tell you
it,
that the 4
it's
houses around me all have their signs.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure there are brothers or sisters of the sorority or fraternity are out there, but they're official. They can't have a house on campus.
Well, they're officially not a house, but
Yeah.
unofficially their house.
Right.
So I did get to talk to, I don't know if you remember, Joe across the street, who lives across there, and he wanted to start getting involved as well. And engaged to find out, you know, what can we do to keep this moving forward? Because we're residents that want to stay here.
Sure.
And I know you guys keep saying that you want to bring people back to the neighborhoods and reestablish this as a, you know, kind of neighborhood instead of just student housing. But that was all I had. Two other just real quick things. I sent a notice to the town manager about 2 months ago. Some of the corners are getting parked close to, and there's a state regulation for 25 feet from a intersection to be marked off so that people don't park there. One of the most particular ones is right across over here. It's, and I know they think somebody went and talked to the people. There's some young ladies that live there, but they park right on it. You come up the hill and they're parked on a hill so you can't see what's going around. And it's right where you go down Foster. So it's kind of a fast lane going down there. There's gonna be an accident there. Plus there's kids walking around, and they do it at night. So it's kind of hard to see them, especially around the corners. So that's one of those that you should look at from a safety perspective. And then finally, we got a hole going on in the ground. I don't know if you saw it over here. Something's going on, it's erupting in the street. It's marked off.
On Williamson?
No, it's not on Williamson, it's what is it, Foster? Let's see, Kelly, what's the next street over? Wooddale. It's on, right in front of the old big house that's down there, where they had the field, open field. There's just looks like the street's erupting. So I'm not sure whether that's sanitary or whether that's a water line. But something is pushing up and it's raised about that far.
I don't think it's Wooddale, I think it's Atkinson.
It's Atkinson. But that was it. I just really want to, I'm going to keep coming back just to try to keep up with where we're at and touch base with you guys because you're our town leaders.
Tell me again about the Greek housing. They've got their logos out there that they're either,
They're on the sides or in the back of the houses. They're not out in front. They're not
Okay.
sitting there saying Phi Kappa Nu or something like
Yeah.
that. But everybody knows what they are. I mean, I had the guys next door to me yesterday said, oh yeah, we're going to have a little kind of, I guess they're doing rush week or something like that. So they're in the middle of rush week and he said, we're going to have a little meeting in our backyard. I said, okay, as long as they don't throw your base inside, we're fine. And they did a great job, they were good. But he said, that's a Greek house, that's a Greek house, that's a Greek house, that's a Greek house. So everything around me is Greek houses. There's no like GDIs.
We have a map that's probably 2 years old of all the Greek houses off campus. You know, they have their official homes on campus, which are highly regulated. They then have, most of them have facilities off campus that are not regulated.
And you had a list of those houses at one time?
There was one, a map that we drew up,
Yeah.
the ones that we knew about, yeah.
Yeah. It wouldn't be hard to, I mean, if you walked around it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They're not shy.
In our LMO as well, I think it's worth, and Monty and I are both on that committee. I'm not sure if Pam's on the call or not, but it might be worth us ensuring that when we look at overlay districts, that neighborhoods like Mr. Gary's is really looked at for those details as to how can we develop an overlay district to ensure that it doesn't become what we don't want it to in the future.
So what is the 1, 2? Can you elucidate?
So, for example, you know, if we want to encourage more families in your neighborhood, all right, for example, we could then, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we can establish an overlay district with different regulations for what can be done in that neighborhood. Obviously, you can't limit like the fact that it's rented or things like that, but you could have additional things that discourage certain activities.
Well, I can tell you one that would discourage it significantly, and that is, I know that it's hard to do anything about, and I've had this conversation before in the past with other people on this committee, and even when we were doing planning, when I was on the board a long time ago, was, there's more, the state law says 3 unrelated. If you find 3 cars in a parking area, you're lucky in a single house. There's usually 4 or 5, and they're not boyfriend, girlfriends. They're all people who live there. There's no controls, and I've been told repeatedly that there's no way to check on that. And I appreciate that from a legal standpoint. There very well may not be something that you have, but I know that in Chapel Hill they do. I don't know how they do it.
We
I
do
didn't ask.
have that ordinance here in the town, but we do run into issues where,
Landlords don't share.
you try to figure it out, and I know that the police chief has talked about it, and our past police chief also talked about that as well, is that how do you really know? Because they can just say that, oh, this person's visiting, or you know what I mean? So it's kind of difficult because now, I know that Elon is represented, so they can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't know that there's like this running list of where students live, off campus. So until that is in place, that's really hard to regulate.
And the landlords don't have any responsibility on telling them how many people.
Not only that, but if only 3 people sign the lease, but they put 5 people in there and split the rent, then no one really knows except for the 5 people that live in that house.
Yeah, and the people who know that the same cars come back every day.
Yeah. But there's other things, like in our LMO discussions, we've talked about, like, for example, cars parked in yards and how many cars can be parked in front of a home, and things of that nature. But we also have to think about, okay, what about a permanent resident? So let's say that you had 4 children who all drove, and then that's 5 vehicles in the front of your house. So it's hard to really regulate that. But it's something that we've all talked about in those discussions, is how do we discourage certain things in certain areas of town and encourage it in others, so that, we can have more family housing in certain areas, and we also discourage, other neighborhoods becoming student housing.
Because they're expanding, it's pretty obvious. I mean, I don't know what that game is that they're playing now, whatever it is they throw up in the air on the tables, but you can see those popping up all over the place now. So you can see where houses that weren't there 2 years ago or a year ago, or now all of a sudden have a whole bunch of people in the front yard playing whatever that game is. I always thought it was beer pong, but they're doing something different now.
Yeah, there's new games now. But Quinn and Alderman Ray and I, we were the ones who went through your neighborhood the day after. And we actually did talk to a couple residents and actually asked a gentleman to come out and sweep where there was glass on the road, and had a discussion with him about expectations.
That was a big house.
Yeah, the big house, if you went down and made a right on the right. And then the trail that you had mentioned, we cleaned all in that. But then the next weekend? The next weekend when we did the cleanup, Quinn was the leader of your neighborhood, and it was filled again.
Oh, yeah. And it's starting to grow again this past weekend, but it's growing at a slower rate. So whatever communication you did, I appreciate that, because it appears that it's taking hold a little bit.
And I know Elon News Network covered it, so some students probably got the information there. I'm sure that the university is putting out their own communications on it as well. And then we also worked with the Student Government Association to recruit students to help with that pickup. And then we split up students with residents and even small children, so people of all ages participated in that event. And our goal is to do it kind of on a more regular basis. So we're looking at March 20th, and then also a date in April, which is part of the state cleanup. We'd like to do Westbrook and University, but those are both DOT roads. So if we can wait until April to do those, we can get DOT assistance on that, especially for safety purposes.
Like around Earth Day or something like that.
Yeah, it's near there, like the 16th through the 20th, something like that. But we just have to have hands. So we have to have people committed to showing up on a Saturday or Sunday morning and, doing the work. And our aldermen all came out and helped, and I think it was a really positive thing for our community. So,
Yeah, and I tell you, I appreciate it, but go ahead and make sure that it's publicized so that, we can get out. And I know that this is just about the time that we're gonna start seeing a turnover in population again too. So it's, we're gonna hit that cycle in another, a month, till the kids start leaving and coming back again. I think they go on Easter break now, is that about right?
no, they don't have any long breaks.
Normally, yes, you'd be correct, but there's no breaks this
It's my
year.
understanding they're just taking one day and stagger it, a day here, a day there, and a day there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell sometimes they're here for a weekend, sometimes they're not, and it's kind of weird. At any rate, I do appreciate the effort, and we'll see what we can do to keep that going and get some of the Greek houses involved, and get them, so they understand what's going on. Anyway, I just want to come up and ask those questions because, I want to be here I'll be here to help drive it as a citizen. I'll keep on asking and keep on going until I see things moving and I can step away without, and it takes its own momentum.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Bring friends, Mr. Gary.
Well, I didn't call Joe today. I broke my glasses, so I was trying to run to get new glasses, so I didn't have time to rouse up Joe. But next time I'll bring him over as well. I know he's got the frat house right beside him, so he's really struggling with this. And he's on the other side of that road that cuts on the cut through, so that's his house up there. So I feel great empathy to him. All right, again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time.
Very much. Are there other citizens who'd like to make comments to this board about their wishes or concerns for the town?
I have Monday.
If not, we'll close the public.
We have Rabbi Monday.
Rabbi?
Rabbi Mendy's on the.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Public comments?
I gotta allow him to speak. Hold on just a second. Okay. You can speak now.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if you can see me as well or just hear me, but thank you all for taking the time to hear us out as citizens. I want to thank in particular Alderwoman Sharp, who put on the agenda the item that I had been in touch with all of you about, Education Day. And I know it's up on the agenda later. I just wanted to give a moment understanding of what it entails and why it's something good for us as a town. So first of all, I wanted to say what it isn't and potentially quell any, fears or whatever that there may be associated with it. And that is that it's not a political partisan item, although it is in Congress and signed by the president, but it's been signed by all presidents from both sides of the aisle and both Congresses from both sides of the aisle, as well as governors from around the country from both sides of the aisle. So that's one thing that it is. And secondly, it doesn't request or sort of involve the town in any way, but it doesn't require any kind of commitments of support for any initiative or putting the town's name behind anything in particular as far as projects or funding or time allotments or anything of the sort. It's primarily a proclamation to highlight first of all, to highlight the importance of education in general, specifically during this year of when we're in the middle of a pandemic, and finally, to acknowledge the good work of Rabbi Schneerson, the leader of the Chabad movement, who was sort of so honored by this proclamation for the first time around. And for context sake, it's been already adopted by the city of Burlington. They already issued a proclamation for this March 24th, and Governor Cooper is also slated to proclaim it across North Carolina, as well as several other towns in our state. So if Elon were to join this nice company of cities and towns and states doing it, it would only render more valuable the proclamation of declaring that day Education Day in support of education and specifically a moral education in our town. So I thank you all for considering that later on in this meeting. And again, thank you to Alderwoman Sharp, and I look forward to finding this hopefully passed later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other citizens who'd like to make any public comments?
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I will note that Davis has joined us. Alderman Montgomery has joined us.
Online?
Yes.
Yes.
Montgomery, good to have you.
Thank you. I apologize for the tardiness.
Perfectly all right. Let's see, Elon University update. Mr. Stein?
Yes, thanks for including me. And I think we're making good progress in our town university meetings. Those seem to be going well. We've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks. Just wanted to let you know that we're continuing with testing. We haven't heard for COVID, we have not heard officially yet if we will get any vaccine doses, but for a site at Elon. But we are still pushing, and we hope that we'll get some doses for vaccines, and that would be for public events. So Janelyn Patterson's been working pretty hard on that with the infectious disease team, and I think we'll see movement in the future. So we will reach out to Rich as soon as we're able to offer any vaccines if we get doses. We did offer for the first time testing for Town of Elon employees, and we did have at least one taker this past Saturday, and we've just sent it out again. I just sent it out yesterday to downtown businesses for 2 more dates for COVID testing this spring. And we actually heard today from Glen Raven that they have some pretty high quality masks. These are double layered reusable masks that they had extras of. And so we've just heard back already from a couple local businesses that would be interested in those. So Glen Raven will be sharing those with downtown businesses or any town employees that are interested. The other thing I was just going to alert you on is that we as an institution are remaining at high alert on our alert matrix. Our case numbers, if you are watching, are decreasing like everywhere else, but wanted you to know that we are remaining at high alert level 2 for a number of reasons. One is we're hearing from Cone that they expect, because of the variant strains, for there to be extra additional cases in the county. We know with warmer weather, many are going to feel like now is the time to not follow restrictions. We know as the state is easing restrictions, many are making choices about that. So as a university, we're staying at high alert to try to keep things under wraps and to make it very clear to students, faculty, and staff that there's still quite a bit of possibility of transmission and the potential for some surges yet this spring. So those are some quick updates. I don't know that we have any more that we need to share at this point, but again, we appreciate the meetings and the partnership.
Mr. Stein, update us on the testing you're doing. You're doing quite a bit of testing, but how often with the students?
Yes, so we, starting the beginning of January with our winter term, we are doing weekly testing of every undergraduate and monthly testing of graduate students, faculty, and staff. So we're using a rapid antigen test from Abbott, and we get results. You actually get the results in 15 to 20 minutes, but they're posted online within 3 hours. And the way we did that, the way we were doing that for Town of Elon or employees or local businesses is they'd actually get a piece of paper with their results on it. But that means we've done, at this point, over 50,000 tests just since the beginning of January. So every student's coming through once a week to make sure. And if we saw a group where we saw a cluster in winter term or spring, or had concerns, and we have groups come back for a second test that week.
One other question. I look at your report every day, the COVID report.
Yeah.
And I notice there's always some staff or faculty members that are tested positive. Are they more or less faculty or more or less staff? Or can you speak to that?
It's really a mix. We've seen both. Some of the time, just like students, they're shocked that they have a positive, and some of the times they can figure out, they have some idea where it's traced back to. But I think it's like the general population, these are folks who, staff or faculty, they might be in any position on campus, really.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? If not, thank you for joining us. We look forward to future visits.
You bet. Thank you. And I did check, the Neighborhood Coalition is supposed to start up again soon. I think the folks who are thinking about COVID-19 and vaccines have been focused there as opposed to restarting that, but that should start again soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see, proclamations, Education and Sharing Day, U.S. proclamation. I noticed we got Alderwoman Sharp's name. Did you want to speak to that?
Rich, did you want to speak to that, or do you just want me to?
I can, that's fine. You had all received an email from Rabbi Minkowitz with the draft proclamation on it. You heard him this evening that this is something that's happened in Washington for quite a few years now. Happens in multiple state houses around the country, including North Carolina. And it is a proclamation celebrating education and the value of education for all of our youth.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Let's see, the budget amendment. Say good?
Actually, I'll take that one as well. Periodically, as we move through the budget year, we bring budget amendments forward. Funding changes or expenditures change, things like that. The one you have in front of you this evening, we brought forward because what we have found is that in the adopted budget, we had $500,000 out of fund balance that we were going to put into our budget. We haven't done that yet. And even without that money bringing forward into our operating budget, we are looking at increased sales tax revenues that would at different spending levels that would keep us in the black. So what we are recommending tonight is that we do a budget amendment that does several things. One, generically, it takes items that were being discussed at staff level for next year's budget, replacing pickup truck, replacing a gator, and bringing it into this year's budget because the revenues are there to support those purchases. That's really, each of those items is tied to something that was in the proposed capital budget for next year. So in Public Works, it would be to purchase instead of purchasing 2 pickup trucks next year, purchase 1 this year, 1 next year. Instead of a mower and a gator next year, purchase them this year. Under the police department, there was an accident, and the vehicle was repaired. We received a check from the insurance company, so that's added revenue that we'd like you to accept and amend the budget accordingly. And $15,000 for cameras that were earmarked for next year. These would be, traffic cameras, street cameras, that kind of thing. Part of the downtown budget for next year, one included replacing a laptop. Also included wireless speakers that we could play music at different times of the year or all year, whichever. Holiday music, that kind of thing. And bring that forward, those 2 purchases forward into this year. Radios that were slotted for next year, we'd like to purchase this year for the fire department. And we started work earlier this year on some concrete repair in front of Station 8. There are other sections that need to be done that we were deferring. We'd like to bring those forward to this year as well. Insurance payment we got from a damaged blackboard at Slade Park. We need to bring that revenue in. And money that was proposed for next year that would fix some drainage issues and trail maintenance at Beth Schmidt. And lastly, an item that I guess has been talked about over a course of years, we came very close to implementing it earlier this year with one of the ice storms, and that's a generator for town hall. What has typically happened is when the power has gone out, Public Works has brought a portable generator over, set it up, and gotten most things running again here. The difficulty we had this year was that that same portable is used as a secondary backup for pump stations. And we had a pump station that's primary backup generator was out of service. We were able to get the part and get it repaired the day before the ice storm came, so it ended up being an issue. But when power goes out at town hall, and I say town hall, if my computer goes out and I can't, do my work necessarily, town can probably get by with it for a day or two. But it also drives the police department, so they're out of power. Also runs the servers that control the town's computer systems. Those all shut down.
How much are we talking about with this?
About $60,000. And that would be a permanent generator outside of town hall, pre-wired.
It wouldn't be a portable one.
Would not be a portable one. It would be anchored to the ground and would have an automatic kick in.
How much is a portable one?
I'm not sure.
200?
Not to run this facility, no. I don't, do you have any idea if we've ever asked Donnie about an additional portable? No,
I looked
I
into
don't have a number.
for the route,
Yeah.
in case we lost power, and granted, we're gonna be, handling a lot of refrigeration and a lot of 220 amps, but the one we were looking at was gonna cost around like $1,600.
1,600.
Be a portable one, just do a couple days for the route.
Well, it seems like that's something we need.
So, Rich, do we have backup for the other fire department station? Do we have generation?
For lights, yeah, I mean, the stations run, but their computer systems are run out of here.
The phone systems are run out of here too for
Okay.
all of it.
So when power goes out here, computers go down, phones go down.
I assume they would operate on natural gas, diesel?
Natural gas.
Yeah.
Is that something that if we were to relocate town hall or build a new town hall, that it could be then moved to a new facility?
As long as we wrote it into the contract that way. If we were to sell this building. Yeah, I mean, well,
You can move a house, you can move a generator.
yeah, we could certainly take it with us. The question would be if we end up splitting town hall from the police department,
And we have to get a second one.
then there might need to be a second one. Now, maybe not as beefy because it's only doing part of the job. That, we'd have to figure that stuff out.
Is this one of the Generac generators, or is it? That's something.
I don't know that I don't know, we haven't spec'd out yet, but it'd be similar to that. It would be, piped with natural gas, so it would be a permanent connection. It'd be wired into our system, and it would have an automatic shut on, shut off, so when the power goes off, generator kicks in. And
Is that 60,000 a quote or just an estimate? Because you said you hadn't spec'd it out, so how would you know 60,000 would accommodate this facility?
That was the budget number that Public Works had come up with, looking at what they thought we were gonna need.
It
So,
could be more.
potentially, but my guess is that the estimates that we've looked at, and I haven't looked at them, but the estimates that were obtained for what we needed would be pretty close.
I know residential Generac around 10,000.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is much more capacity.
Do we have a motion to approve the budget amendment?
Before there's a motion, one thing that came up after this went to press, We heard that the state was looking at forgiving for this year only liquor licenses, the fees for liquor licenses at some level. And while it's not a lot of money, we took a look at it, and let me see if I've got the, yeah, $540 we collect for our share of beer and wine fees. We've been working very close with our businesses this past year, keep them going and do what we can. Certainly, it's not a boon to anybody, nor is it a huge hit to us. But if the board would be willing to amend that budget amendment to add in $540, that would allow us to tell all of our businesses, we're waiving the beer and wine fees that are due in May, and we'll see you next year.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
Are we approving with the $540? Is that what we're approving?
Yes, I think
That's
so.
what-
Right, Mr. Roden?
That's
So to make sure I'm clear, we're approving all the capital improvements that you mentioned, moving them up from 2022 to this year.
That was, I'm assuming that's the motion, yes.
And that amount is, what you said, based on that $500,000, we get a surplus,
That's 724,000.
724,000, okay.
That, the $724,000 is how much, once we bring that $500,000 in, we would anticipate being $724,000 in the black at the end of the fiscal year. We're recommending using part of that, and let me find the other attachment. Come on. So, in essence, what it is, it's a series of transactions on both sides of the ledger. It would be an increase in expenditures of $264,550 plus the 540, so 265,095, I believe. And that would increase the expenditure as well as revenues. And that's still leaving about $480,000, $485,000 of that fund balance untouched.
Which we were looking at these items to have to work for next budget year anyway.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think we got a motion. Do we ever get a second?
I'll second that motion, Mayor. This is Davis.
Yeah, thank you. Any discussion?
In terms of the vehicles, I know that at one point, it was discussed that we would look at a committee to look at sustainable energy and things of that nature going forward. Did we look at options in terms of vehicle replacement?
We have. Right now, we have not found, we found a lot of electric vehicle pickup trucks that are coming out soon. We haven't found a marketable one yet. We did look at pricing on hybrids, and we budgeted about $40,000 for like a Chevy 1500 style pickup. The Chevy 1500 hybrid pickup is about 44. So what I've instructed Donnie to do is to drop the specs for a hybrid, and we'll go out and we'll see what the pricing is, and if it comes in high, we may be able to accommodate that additional couple $1,000s in our existing budget. If not, we would come back and see about moving some money around so we can afford to do that. But that was the goal. And it does, has same towing capacity, same hauling capacity. Appears to be pretty much a straight swap of one of our trucks for a new hybrid.
Rich, do we have a quick charging station for electric vehicles?
We do not. This would not be a plug-in.
It would be a hybrid?
Hybrid, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
But they,
the plug-in EVs are not quite market-ready yet for pickups.
right. And what Alderwoman Sharp is referring to is with the governor's energy plan, eventually they have a goal to convert all those governmental fleets over. So I guess that for future budgets for Mr. Green and I think Mr. Allison, who are on the budget committee, that's something we probably need to work into the budget is a quick charging station. Just an asterisk.
Works
Yep.
here.
Yep. And, you know, and some of those we'll have to figure out. Once, say, like the pickup trucks, once they're out and about, and we can see what happens to a, you know, Chevy 1500 electric pickup truck over the course of a day. Will the full charge last the way we use our trucks in a 4 square mile town? So do they need a $50,000 quick charging facility so we have something to plug all of our vehicles into?
Right.
Or can we rely on overnight charging or somewhere in the middle? Cruisers would be a little bit different. You know, they go home, so, you know, the overnight charging, if you will, would be at somebody's house. Do we need quick charging here so that they can come, start their shift, get a charge and go out, or do it at the end of their shift? You know, those things we have to figure out moving forward.
What would we do with the gator and mower we currently have? Would that be up for an auction or sale?
I
Plan on getting rid of them?
The mower was being replaced, I believe, yes. And the Gator, the one that we have that would be the oldest we're actually replacing, would probably become be a backup, but it would go to the parks and they go to the recreation facility, so they'd have one there. A little bit less demand perhaps than what Public Works uses them for.
We have a motion on the table, it's been seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. 10-year tax relief. Misty?
So, every year we write off taxes that are 10 years old. So Michelle's created the list. There are 8 pieces of property on the list. The total amount with the tax and the interest is $613.58. So just asking for permission to write these off.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussions or questions for Misty?
I think I ask this every year, but a lot of those are situations where they no longer own the property, right?
Most of these look like personal property.
Oh, okay.
So I can tell that a couple of them are mobile homes.
Okay.
And sometimes they're sold and information doesn't get exchanged correctly at the county level.
Okay.
None of them are real property.
Okay.
I
Right,
can
based
tell
off of
by
the number,
dollar
yeah.
amounts, Yeah.
Okay.
How does the total compare to past years?
It's lower than it has been in the past,
Let's see, do we have a motion yet?
I made the motion.
You make a motion, you have a
I
second?
second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Ad valorem tax advertisement. Misty?
This is just a list of the 2020 delinquent taxes. Michelle has to advertise in the newspaper at least one time before June 30th. I laid a current list at your places. So there are 10 pieces of property right now. She does have 2 that are making monthly payments. One that'll be paying on the 12th of the month and one on the 31st of the month. So it should be down even lower than this by the end of this month. But the 10 pieces of property, it's $4,123.97. So we just need permission to advertise these.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Discussion of the COVID emergency declaration. Mr. Rodner?
So this was back February 26th. On February 26th, when the governor's Executive Order 195 took effect, the mayor issued a new emergency declaration here in Elon that maintained the levels of mass gathering at 10 people inside and 25 outside. We also clarified the language that we were referring to the governor's executive orders as they are amended. The state has taken, has created limits for retail uses, gyms, restaurants, bars, whole range of uses. That our intent was that in Elon, the state's limits on all those specific uses would apply. It'd only be on the generic mass gathering that we would have lower numbers than the state. And we've been there since last March, as the state has gone up and down a couple of times. Alderman Allison had inquired about why we were staying lower than the state, and asked that I put this on the agenda so that we could talk about it and I guess have a better understanding of why we've kept it where we have.
Yeah, and the reason I raised the question, I mean, I think it'll be a year now. We started this process, and I don't think anybody could say no one hasn't been affected with COVID and the pandemic. And in over a year's time, 500,000 people have died across the country. But as a country, we've learned a lot, we've done a lot. There's been a lot of great efforts. We decided to follow the lead of our governor, obviously with executive order. Executive Order 116 started off, this is going to be a 15-day period to look back, okay? And we all know where that's gone. And through the trials and tribulations, we've continued to abide by the governor, whether you agreed with it or not. And my question is to us as a town leaders, what will be the criteria that we use to follow the governor's orders to release or to minimize the restrictions, and to decide that we're going to allow more people to gather outside, which I think we're seeing. I think the university and Dr. Stein alluded to it now, is that the numbers are dropping. That doesn't mean that that's a guarantee they're going to continue that way. But I look at people in our community that have had to forego family events, baby showers, things like that, because they can't have 10 people in a house. I think about me personally, my church life group. We had to disband because of the restrictions, because we didn't want to violate the orders. So my question is to us as town leaders, what will be the criteria that we will use to increase the number for outdoor and indoor gathering? I think it's a fair question. I think our businesses obviously have suffered, but I think more importantly, what message are we sending to our citizens that we want to give them back some of the freedom that they deserve to have? So I throw that question out.
Have we had any pushback from citizens or businesses about our restrictions?
Our restrictions don't affect businesses. So in that sense, no. We have had some pushback from some residents. Most recently, I had somebody who called, they wanted to know why we were lower than the governor, because they had a 60th anniversary party they were going to have. They had all been vaccinated, and they wanted to know what the penalty was, because they were going to have their party, regardless of what our proclamation said. I guess from my perspective, what would get me to change my recommendation? I was looking at. I lost the screen now. I was looking at my history, because when when all this started back on March 15th, and we started getting these daily reports from the county. And after about a month and a half, I went back to the very beginning and started tracking them, just because I wanted to see, we kept hearing things about how it was good, bad, and, oh yeah, we've had, this number of new cases, or this number of new cases, and actually they weren't talking about, they were talking about the total number of cases. So, the numbers were escalating into the hundreds or the thousands, but nobody's talking about how many were actually day by day. I went back and figured that out for Alamance County. And I will make one correction. We put our order in place before the governor put the state order in place because of our population, the students, the in and out, spring break, all that was a big concern. Last April, after the governor put his order in, we had our order in. We were seeing daily new totals. April 1st was 0. April 2nd was 5, 2, 3, 1, 1, 5, 5. I mean, very minimal numbers, and yet we were going into lockdown. That was the month we were closed. I think today's number was 37, 32. So the numbers are still much higher than they were when we put this all into place. Would I be waiting to look for ones and twos of a daily count to make a recommendation that we release it? Probably not. We are seeing people vaccinated, and that's a great thing. A lot of people aren't vaccinated yet, and that's an issue. We still have a population that half the people who live in town, a good portion probably stay here every weekend. I think probably a good portion of them leave. I know when I was in college, I had a car. I used to go places on weekends. I didn't stay on campus necessarily. So we do have a transient population that's coming and going and bring whatever risk back that they may encounter. We also have a population, as you heard this evening from Mr. Geary, that there are portions of that population that tend to gather together into large groups. That's not what a typical community has. So we're not a typical North Carolina community. We have features about us that set us apart from most other communities. Well, Charlotte has a university, Greensboro has a university. Well, that's true, and they're also much larger communities. I don't know that there's any other town in the state of North Carolina that half its population comes from a university. There might be one or two, but highly unique, I think. I would look for lower transmission, lower number of daily cases, higher vaccination rates. What I indicated to the mayor was, we'll take a look at it in a month, and I'll give you my opinion in a month, and you can issue a new one or not, depending on how you want to handle it. I'll also.
All I can tell you, several citizens mentioned to me they were just disappointed.
Yeah.
We decided to try to what I call protect a certain population of our town, and we solicited advice from a certain population of our town, not the whole town, but just one population. And we can be afraid, or we can say we're gonna move forward. And let's face it, we've got a lot of young adults. They're gonna make stupid decisions.
Yep.
But you know what? They've got a lot invested in being students here. They have a responsibility. And it shouldn't be the town's responsibility, our police department's responsibility, to try to keep them safe from themselves. That shouldn't be our responsibility. We should be looking out for the whole community and their interests.
Well, I agree.
And that's my point. I would like to see us consider, if the governor goes back and restricts it more, then that's what we should do. But for us to take a more conservative approach on opening up our town and allowing people to gather, I just don't think it's fair to a lot of our citizens here. And the example you cited, that's a good example of where those people are missing family opportunities.
I canceled a family reunion last year. I agree 100%. And maybe it's my view of government that drives what my recommendation is. And I'm basing my recommendation as much on protecting the students, probably more so than protecting the students, protecting the residents of town who live here all year round, who come into contact with students, whether it's at a restaurant or in a grocery store or at Target, wherever. That's my concern, is that we see it spread throughout, a wider spread throughout the community. You heard Jeff Stein from the university talking, Cone is saying they're anticipating and they're very concerned about variants, that we're gonna see another increase. I heard the CDC say the same thing, that they are planning for a fourth surge based on these new variants. I'm not a doctor.
No, and I'm not as well. And
All I do is I hear what the experts are saying.
And I can't predict. I'm just saying is that we don't know what the future holds. We know that each day that we restrict our citizens, it's not fair to them, particularly when the entire state has taken a different approach. And if we're going to follow them, state whether we like it or not, then it only seems like we should have followed them in releasing some of the restrictions that we've imposed on citizens.
Davis Montgomery has a comment. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Davis.
Thank you, Diane. I appreciate it. I understand what Monty's saying. Don't necessarily disagree, but I guess I looked at it a little differently, Monty. I didn't look at it as though I was trying to protect the students from themselves. I was actually looking at it that the traveling, I won't say just the students, the traveling population presents more of a risk to the full-time residents, was the way I was looking at it. Like you say, every person has to be responsible for their own choices. So if a student or just a world traveler decides to do that, that's their choice. That's their responsibility. So I'm not worried about protecting them from themselves. You kind of get what you earn, so to speak. In terms of where a place would be that would make me comfortable, and Rich has started down that path, if we could see that the positive test number and infected or positive test number was trending lower than, and this would be the combined number of both the town, because we don't get it for the town, do we, Rich?
We get it for the zip code.
The zip code.
Area code.
If we could see the combined number between the university and the zip code trend lower than percentage-wise the state, then I think and I say that as a trend, not as a one-time event, probably a week, maybe 10 days, maybe even 2 weeks trend, then I think that's probably a good indication, like Rich said, that we can come back and revisit it and say, we're seeing results that the town is doing better than the state. We see a higher number of people being vaccinated. I don't know there's any way that we can track the number of people who have been vaccinated out there. And we've all run into folks that have said, I'm not getting the vaccination. I don't care what, because it's got a chip in it that's going to let the government spy on me, whatever the reason happens to be. So those are outliers that we can't control. But I think if we see the numbers that we have are concrete numbers that we trust and we have faith in, and they're trending lower than the state's numbers, then I think it would be a good reason for me to say, well, you know what, I'm feeling comfortable about what the town as a whole is doing. And the other thing, I'm sorry, I just had one other thought. The other thing about opening it up, it's kind of an oddball twist on the idea that as you open it up, more people will come. I think there's also some people who would say, well, with the population they've got, if they open it up, I'm not so sure I'd feel comfortable going there. Probably not a large number of people. There's probably going to be a few who would think of it that way. But for every one you have going one way, you might have one going the other way. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you, Davis. Do we have a motion to approve, and then we can have further discussion?
What are we approving?
Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't a motion attached to the item. It was more just for discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want I just want to make a comment too, and I think the thing that we got to, and I see where Monty's coming from, is we don't want the perception that the university is dictating the town. I'm not saying that's happening, but I think from our town residents' perspective, there's always been that inclination that the university is ruling the town. And so I think the comments that Monty has heard, and I've heard a couple as well, is we need to somehow dispel that perception. I know that's not where you're coming from, Richard, and I understand your reasoning completely. And, yeah, the facts are there. No question about it. I think that would be really, I think the biggest concern there is that the perception? And I don't know, we're in a tough situation because half our population or more is the student. So, you know, I think there is an issue there if we're out and about, or we're getting our citizens protected from the students. You know, so, I mean, I see both sides of the story there, to be honest with you. I just want to make sure that, I think if I'm correct, I think that's kind of more the concern perception-wise. Does that make sense?
I'll add to it too. So when you first put this out, Monty, I mean, I definitely, I understand what it is, like, because we do have these residents, and I don't have the answer, and we are in this weird position. But from a restaurateur's perspective in our downtown, before COVID, we already had our downtown businesses, and we all know this. It's no new information, but we had locals and students, and we had our locals that wouldn't want to come downtown until students were gone. But now, since COVID has been here, they've been more heightened about it. So especially if the university would announce that a cluster broke out or something, we definitely saw less of those locals want to come down. And granted, we're 2 restaurants that I have that are not open for dine-in. We've seen in the past 3 weekends when we've had these nice Saturdays, it's been a little hustling and bustling downtown. So we've had good days for the businesses. And we're still seeing students partying, as Mr. Gary said. We're seeing that. My fear, and do I think the town should regulate? I don't have that answer. But my fear is if we open it up to 50 people to go play beer pong in the backyard, next thing, and if it trends how it did pre-COVID time, where however the party would get broke up, all the students would just come downtown to our downtown businesses, inhibition's out the window. They're not following regulation, and is that going to prevent people from, kind of to Davis's comment, is that going to prevent people from coming downtown? So now we're still in the midst of a pandemic, but now you've got streets full of alcohol inebriated students. But is that our job to protect them from themselves? And I've kind of looked at it at Davis's point is like, and what Mr. Rodner was saying, kind of protecting our local residents, our year-round residents from that. And I don't know if there's a way, like ideally I would like the university to regulate, hey, no parties. And I think they have that on campus, but I don't know how you regulate that off campus. Because if they could do that, that could help free up our people who want to have their 60th anniversary or baby showers. But I don't know how you do, how a university would regulate an off-campus party. But from the downtown perspective, I mean, again, before pre-COVID, it got to the point where me and Peter went to our chief of police when Mr. Cliff Parker was here, and Chief Blackwater continued it. But we would call up on Saturdays, the police office, and just have somebody come walk through because it just got that rowdy. And I mean, we all have that cabin fever now, so I can only imagine. But so that's just a comment. It's not answering any questions, but I totally understand what you're saying, and I don't have the right answer for it. But I do know if we allow it to be 50 in the backyard, we're going to put 75 people in the backyard for the students that are in walking distance of our downtown. But we got to think more than just our downtown, right? We got to think everybody in our town.
For once, I don't have an opinion either way.
Yeah, that's all right. I mean,
But, you know, I see both sides as well. For one, you know, as a health educator, the CDC has no gathering limit recommendations. None. So it's like, well, what does that 11th person do versus 9 people inside? It's the same way with the, you know, with the, the time limit, the curfew, you know, like 10:01 versus 9:59, you know, but I understand like the premise behind it though, right? Because when you add more people or when you add length of time, you know, there's room for more exposure. So I don't know what the answer is. I mean, just in my own neighborhood, I can tell you that people are gathering when they want to gather and they'll risk it, or they just don't even know what the rule is. I would argue that probably the majority of our residents don't know that that is in place. But I don't have an opinion either way. If we keep it low, we keep it low. And if we keep it high, we keep it high. I mean, we've all missed out on things over the last year. Everyone in the world has. We're not any different. And we're just going to have to continue to miss out for a little bit longer until probably next year, because kids aren't going to be vaccinated until then.
hypothetically speaking, if somebody, they throw their 60th anniversary party, they don't care what the penalty is and what have you, they get a penalty and they want to fight it. How does that, I mean, do we override the state or
They'd probably spend more money fighting it than just paying it.
Sure, but when it comes to, I mean, I'm looking at like federal deregulations of like drugs and marijuana. You know, federally it's still illegal, but in certain states it's open, but they fall back to the federal.
We have a local emergency, and that's the rule in Elon. So we cannot be less strict than the state. So if the state's at 25 and 50, we can't say, oh yeah, we're gonna go 40 and 80.
Okay.
We can't do that. We can be more strict than the state. States can be more strict than the federal government, generally speaking.
Okay. That answers my question.
Is there a way to get access to, as far as parameters going forward, to ease it up some? You know, the CDC came out, said, you know, if 2 people have been vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask around each other. Mm-hmm. You know, who knows how that's going to be figured out necessarily, but do we get statistics as a town of the number of the folks that have been vaccinated? In other words, I actually have been vaccinated with both because my wife works for the health department. They have extra vaccine. I've already had, even though I'm not in the criteria at this point. Not that you would know my name specifically on that list, or you may or may not. What is that? Is that?
I have not seen anything from the county other than their total numbers of vaccines on hand, been distributed, been used. If they were to do it like they have done with cases, they would say, oh, you know, the 27244 zip code has had this many people vaccinated.
Right.
But that zip code goes all the way up to Caswell County.
Yeah.
You know, so I have no, I haven't seen anything that would tell me how many people in Elon have been vaccinated.
I guess my point there is, at a certain point, and this is a nationwide issue, how do we know? I mean, you know, so a big part of easing up is the vaccinations, right? I mean, I know obviously the numbers speak for themselves, and we're seeing numbers, you know, go down, although it's still very prevalent. You know, what is the, not just town of Elon, but I'm curious just in general, how's that going to be affected with us opening things back up is to knowing those, not necessarily that Mark Green has had his vaccinations, but zip code or whatever, and
We know at the national level, about 2 million people a day are getting shots. We know on average how many people are getting shots in the state of North Carolina. We could probably figure out how many shots at least the county health department is doing every day in Alamance County. I don't know that we'll ever know how many Walgreen or Cone, but those would come in under the state numbers. All we can do is say, all right, well, at some point, 50% of the people in North Carolina have gotten their shots. And make, again, I'm not seeing anything that tells me how many people in Elon.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing there too is, this is like the flu. It's not gonna go away. I mean, you're not gonna have a zero COVID rate. I mean, that's just never gonna happen. Yeah. And so when do we go, hey, I mean, there are gonna be students that are gonna get COVID. There's gonna be people that get COVID just like they have the flu, although mysteriously the flu hasn't happened this year, but.
We have masks on. We wear masks every year.
Yeah.
We're not
It's a
socializing.
recommendation every year.
But I guess my thing there is, where is that? And I don't know the answer to this question, but I will make this statement: we can't wait till it gets to zero. I mean, that's just totally unreasonable and completely asinine to do that. And I'm not saying that's the proposal. I'm not saying that, but just as a general comment, that's totally unrealistic and not something that's going to happen. And it concerns me, just as the country, that people were thinking, oh, well, it's going to go to zero once everybody gets their vaccines. That's absolutely not going to happen. Medically, scientifically, that's not going to happen. Because the variants come and everything, just like the flu. So I guess, my comment would be, if we want to see the trends, if we want to look at the vaccine, numbers for whatever information we have, we should keep a close eye on that. And again, I see both sides of the story too. And I think at the end of the day, we want to protect our citizens, but we also want to make sure that we're not delaying what our citizens that are pent up after being in this situation a year and going, no, well, the governor's saying this, but we're backing off. So,
I mean, I guess it goes back to to answer the question, from my opinion, when it gets down to that, like, I would feel more comfortable personally once university age students are opened up to start getting vaccines. Because, I mean, we have a high median age, for Elon, and we got two dynamic different groups, with college students and then, 50-year-olds. I mean, isn't that around our average 52-year-old in Elon?
I remember.
And I would feel comfortable once, and some of them probably are already getting it, because I know they opened it up for student teachers, student employees, essential workers. So it's starting to happen. But I think once that gate opens,
It's about a third of the students
okay,
are now eligible because they're employed through the university.
but this, I mean,
It would be nice
sucks.
to have data regarding vaccines that's not just the health department, for sure. Especially if Elon University were to get a vaccination site, is that gonna be counted? Because right now, it wouldn't be. But we could also look at positivity rate. So what's our positivity? So like right now, in the latest one, it's 7.2. Maybe we look at, okay, well, what's a positivity rate that we're more comfortable with?
The target at the state level has been 5.
I mean, not to belabor the point, it's hard to come up with a metric that's going to give us a definitive confidence in whatever we do. If you want to lower the positivity rate, then everybody who's healthy goes get tested. That lowers the rate.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not sure what that accomplishes. So my point is, we need to be mindful about what is it we're looking for as an answer. And there's no answer in the sky. We have to decide as a town, where we feel comfortable. Just like Mark said, it's never going to go away. We have to protect the most vulnerable in our population, in our society. Hopefully that's Twin Lakes, those people who are 60 years and older. Hopefully those folks have gotten their vaccines. The population that's 18 to 22 is the least vulnerable, statistically. The people who get it are recovering. There are people who die. Yes, there are people who die. There are children who die. We're letting our children go back to schools. That's a good sign. That's positive. And that's what we've got to build on, the positivity. If we're gonna wait until the students get out of semester, then all that's done is says, well, we as a town have dictated our decision-making because we took that population out and now we're protected. Well, maybe we are, maybe we're not, but we just have to come up as a town to decide how we're gonna do this and not keep kicking the can down the road.
I mean, does the number matter as much as, I mean, when you drive by the parties, they're not wearing masks and they're within 2 feet. You know, so
I walk through the town, I see large populations, and they're having fun. They're young people, you know, so I don't criticize them. If they don't want to wear a mask, that's their prerogative.
Right.
I don't judge them. That's their prerogative. I choose to wear a mask because I want to, but more or less to make you feel better. I may get COVID tomorrow, knock on wood, I hope I don't. But you know what? I can't live in a bubble. None of us can live in a bubble. We can't keep this town as a bubble. We have to function.
can we please? No, I'm kidding.
No. So that's all I have to say. I just want to make sure this doesn't go down 60 days from now, and we still don't know when we're going to do something.
So is this a 30-day proclamation, or is it?
It's open-ended.
It's already a thing, right? We're not voting on it.
No.
It's already in place.
They're signing on the 26th. And so, you know, again, coming up on the end of March, take a look, make sure the information is clear, and see what that decision is.
So should we just agree to revisit at our next meeting? Is that something everybody's comfortable with, or is it something that we need to revisit prior to then?
So we get the daily site updates for Alamance County.
Yep.
That we get.
I mean, it's not a democratic decision.
That's right.
None of the executive orders are a democratic decision as a board. We don't vote on that. It's the mayor's prerogative.
Yeah.
So the mayor has to make that decision.
Well, we get the daily reports from the university every day, how many new cases, how many is quarantined. And at Twin Lakes, everybody's been vaccinated. At the residents, all the staff people have it. I say everybody, I think it's something like 98% of the residents have been vaccinated. And they're beginning to loosen up a little bit for the first time. They don't let outsiders come in at all, not even our grandkids or sons and daughters. But they're just now letting different people meeting different villas over there. So I can go visit my neighbors for the first time.
You're still allowed to come out if you wanted to go eat downtown. You could
Oh, yeah.
go eat downtown.
Well, let's go to the next topic.
I wish I had an answer for you, Monty. I really do.
Nobody does, not even Dr. Fauci.
And I think the comment has been, we seem to be getting close. Nobody wants to blow it early.
When would you like to revisit this?
I'd like to do it in 2 weeks.
I'm comfortable with 2 weeks.
What are we gonna know differently now than we did 2 weeks? I don't know. You can't set a date out there without having some expectations about whether you're gonna maintain those same restrictions. And I've yet to hear that, but
Rich, doesn't the emergency order give you the ability to review the numbers and make the changes at any time? And if that's the case, if you see a positive trend or you think it's, you could do it just like we did the last time. You could just send out a note, let everybody know that you're making a recommendation, and have folks just give them your feedback. I don't think we need to wait for a certain day. I think just when Rich sees the numbers starting to move in the right direction.
It is not written under the mass gathering that I'm looking at real quickly that I have that authority for the mass gathering numbers. The other issues of operations of town facilities and things like that, I do have that ability, but not the,
Okay. Yeah, I remember you
not the
did for
mass
the hours,
gathering.
the curfew, the parking, and that sort of thing. I just thought it applied to everything.
You know, that's written as a hard and fast one.
Okay.
Which is
Well, I think
under mayor.
Lonnie's suggestion's a good one. You know, a couple weeks, and I realize, you know, that's an arbitrary number, but I think at the end of the day, looking at it more frequently than not is my recommendation.
I can get down with
In 2 weeks, vaccines might be open to everybody too.
that. Doesn't the Greensboro Coliseum mass vaccination
It's
start?
open tomorrow.
10th, yeah.
And the 24th is, I think, the start of group 4, those with pre-existing conditions. They'll be eligible.
While we're on it before, the COVID question and answer, actually, the Elon First Baptist Church is holding a question and answer with 4 doctors on the panelist tomorrow evening. It's free on Zoom, so anybody has questions about it.
Would your thought to have another meeting in 2 weeks?
Is this something that has to be done in a meeting in 2 weeks, or can we revisit this with
An email.
emails?
That's what I was thinking.
I think the same process you've done so far in the past year about executive orders is what we need to do. You've got to make that decision along with the mayor and provide a recommendation. How do you feel? I mean, the mayor's got to agree or not agree.
It's good. Thank you, good discussion. Review of Elon University proposed funding. They came up with a 10-year plan or something, and
Yep. Just as, quick background, I guess. Back in 2013, the Fire and Rescue Squad signed an agreement with the university that actually traced the funding back to as far as 2008. And from 2008, there were annual increases of a couple $1,000s most years. Got up to $60,000 by 2013. 2015, it went to 70. 2017, it went up to 80. And there was a note about renegotiating in 2017. I have no knowledge of what happened, whether it was renegotiated or discussed or just stayed flat and nobody thought about it. But currently, the university is contributing $80,000 each year to the fire department. In addition, they make contributions to the police department. Currently, that's at $14,000. They make a general contribution to the town of about $6,000, and they make a contribution equivalent to half of the cost of the downtown coordinator position, which is, right now, it's probably about $44,000 a year for that. I contacted the university last spring because I knew the 2021 expiration of that 2013 agreement was coming up. A couple of conversations provided some information back to the university as far as the cost of the fire service, different ways of looking at our costs for the fire service and how that would relate to an entity such as the university if it were a taxable entity, or based on a population, or based on valuation, or number of calls to go to the university versus the rest of the town. Obviously, there was transition at the university, so those conversations were just starting, some transition, COVID hit. We kind of said, all right, we'll pick it up in 2 weeks when the governor's emergency ends in 2 weeks. And it kind of stayed on hiatus through the summer and into the fall. Brought it back to the attention of the new person at the university I was dealing with. And we've touched base once or twice, not to any great extent. And last time I brought it to their attention, they said, well, we'll go back and take a look. We're working on a proposal. And this past week, received a proposal from the university of how they are suggesting to handle their contributions. And I'll say, the university is a nonprofit entity. They don't pay property taxes, they're not required to. They have some facilities where they do pay property taxes, such as the inn, but the vast majority of the campus is nonprofit. So they've agreed to provide funding in the past, and they continue to propose to provide funding. And the proposal that was given to me for the current year would keep it at $80,000 for the fire department and increase that by 2% a year over the next 10 years. For 21, and the police department would leave that at 14,000, increase that by 2%. And the town donation, the police donation have never been part of this agreement, so wrapping it all up into one package. The town funding, which is currently at 6,000, they're proposing to raise that to 7,500 and then increase that by 2% each year. And reiterating the commitment to pay half the cost of the downtown development coordinator's position.
But that's not in the agreement.
That's not in the agreement. I think there was a separate agreement, verbal or written, I'm not sure, but when we created that position, that was done after coordinating with them and getting an agreement from the university that they would pay for half of it. So that's on a separate pathway. Talked a little bit about the 2% and how, that's based on some past low inflation periods. Inflation goes up, what do we do? Talked about 10 years, maybe it's a 5-year agreement, or maybe it's 5 years at 2% and then floats with whatever inflation is after that. And needs approval for higher up the chain. Before we did that, or before I had the university do that, I wanted to bring it back to you and get your direction. As I found out, I can't ask you an executive or closed session. There's nothing confidential about this, so I'll ask you now what your thoughts are on proceeding with this and where we stand.
I just want to commend the university because I think that this is a great proposal. Is it, their portion? No, but they are not required to pay anything. And they definitely, in my opinion, did us a solid as a town when they asked us to change their, what word am I trying to use? For the Inn of Elon, zoning. The zoning, so that it was then taxable. They did not have to do that. It could have.
Zoning has nothing to do with the taxation. The zoning was the use. The use was taxable.
But they did request that we change it to be taxable, right? That was on them.
They asked that we change the zoning to allow them to build the hotel.
Okay.
The hotel by its very nature is taxable.
Okay. Okay.
Zoning doesn't affect taxing, that's all.
But, I do think that, this is a great starting point. I do have just a couple of questions. Does the agreement with the downtown administrator, do pay increases come into play? So if that role's pay increased, does it cover 50% or does it only cover up to 40,000?
It has always been budgeted on our part at 50%.
Okay.
That's why I said currently it's about 44,000, not the 40,000.
And in your discussions, were there any talks about future buildings that may have revenue attached, such as a performing arts center?
No.
And in this agreement, would we be agreeing to no longer asking for assistance on special projects?
Not covered in the agreement as far as I can see.
Okay.
We didn't talk about that, so I don't see that as being part of this.
Okay. Can we just ask them that? Like, if we had a special project, are they gonna say, sorry, no can do, because we have this in place. Because they have contributed to major projects like the walkway underneath the railroad tracks. They've, helped with sidewalks, around campus, but
I think that's a really good point, because they have helped us a lot with different things like that, and, not that we're, holding them to any specific project or whatever, but I think Emily makes a good point that will that still be in consideration depending on what the situation is, going down the road when those things come up, so. I agree.
Are we negotiating with them with the new water line down Haggard?
I've had conversations with them, partly about timing. We mentioned earlier, I think, that DOT announced they were gonna pave that section of roadway this next year. We've gotten DOT to put that off a year. But I think DOT still has said that they wanna have that area paved by the end of June and 23, which drives, when that water line has to be put in. Quite frankly, they haven't gotten to that part yet of their development project, so it's something they're gonna have to, they're thinking about outside their normal development process, because it hadn't, they're not even sure when they're gonna build the buildings that will need that water line.
Rich, I have a couple questions. One is, it's kind of unique that we created a position with the premises that Elon would support half the salary. My question would be now is, if they didn't do that, we would still have a need to have a downtown coordinator, and we wouldn't need that 44,000, 46,000 support. So I think that kind of clouds things. From my perspective, as a town, that it's almost as if she has an obligation, because half her salary is being through a grant provided by the University of Elon. So, I don't see her as being partisan to the university by any means, but I think that was a way for us to start the position. Why would we continue to use that as part of this package? Because I think what we've done here is we've taken a number that was grabbed out of the sky and said, let's start from here and let's add a 2% increase to it. Now, granted, you're exactly right. The university has no requirement, obligation whatsoever as a nonprofit to contribute to the town, nor does the community church or any other churches that are nonprofit, and nor would we expect them. But we also realized we wouldn't have purchased a ladder truck to accommodate 3-story buildings unless we had to. And the reason we had to is because of university property. And as Mark has said, they've made lots of contributions that don't get recognized in those $80,000. But most of those are somewhat self-serving.
That's right.
The tunnel under the road, that wasn't for the Georgetown community or ballpark. The sidewalk down Haggard, that wasn't for ballpark, it was for their students. Obviously, we as citizens use it, we all benefited from it. So not to cloud things, they have made tremendous contributions. But I think we have to look at, what is it, what's a fair amount? As you said, we know 80,000 is nice, but as we begin to look at other expenditures, capital improvements, that are necessitated because of growth. Let's face it, most of the growth in our town has been from the university. That's a positive thing. So we have to figure out, $80,000 is a lot of money to a lot of people. You look at their endowment, you look at the expenses. That's not even a professor. They pay professors more than that a year. They bring entertainers in, pay them that much for a night. So although it's a gracious amount, I think we really have to take a step back and go, what is a reasonable amount? And not just take this for saying that anything we're going to be appreciative of. But we've got to realize in order for us to grow together, we've got to work together. And let's be reasonable.
What is our annual percent increase for our capital gains for the fire department and police department for us? Are we increasing our budget for them 2% each year? If we looked over the past 10-year trend, how much, that's my cell phone password.
I would guess that it exceeds 2% a year without, without having all those budgets in front of me. But I would say that in general, it's more than 2% a year.
And since we are into the, so I mean, I think that's something we should take into consideration when we're speaking with them, especially if they want to break it down to fire department and police department. But then the downtown position, because of this, and I don't know if we've actually gotten an answer if it's a true written agreement contract from them. But is this a position in which they could redact at any moment, saying, "Hey, we're just not going to do it," and there's no legal ground for us, and now we either, as a town, are required to let this person go, or eat the leftover and pay the rest of her salary, or what if she decides, to move on to another position or another job, or then we foot with the bill for paying 100% of a salary, because like Monty said, we need this position, right? And that would put us in a tough spot. So
I don't think it's contingent on the person, it's just the role.
sure, well, let's hope not. There's no
We
contract.
should know if there is an agreement and what that agreement does look like, I agree.
And I'm not opposed to them doing it, and hopefully the person is a non-biased, but it can look biased in given. But it also can be looked at as working that symbiotic relationship, having somebody working together. I just want to make sure whatever that position is currently, and with the contract, that the university can't just decide, I don't want to do this without any legal recourse. Because if there's no written contract, right, they could theoretically just pull it. Yeah.
Perhaps, yes.
Yeah, I think personally, I would rather for that not be, just like we wouldn't have somebody in the finance department sponsored by the University of Elon. And that's essentially what we're saying, is that we've got an employee that's sponsored half by the university.
And I'll say, my understanding was because there's more to that downtown program than the position. Obviously, there's events and there's other things that go into that department budget. And my understanding is at the time, rather than making a contribution to the downtown budget, and however, whatever that is, they committed to helping to fund the position.
That is correct. I remember, that was the.
Whether it's whether it's written, I'll find out. It hasn't been.
I just hate to see somebody's employment contingent upon a budget amount that that's not a obligation to pay us, and then we've got to go back and adjust our budget because whatever happens, or like you said, if she were to leave, is that contingent on would they still be obligated to continue to pay us that amount of money, and we didn't replace that position? So I think that was great that they did that.
Yes.
But I'd much rather see that money being used for maybe something else. Maybe it is a downtown function, not a position. Maybe it's contribution to enhancements we do downtown at $40,000, as opposed to providing the salary. Now, you can say it's the same thing, but somehow the premise that we've got an employee on our staff because we were fortunate to get a contribution from the university doesn't really seem, if you listen to it.
If we had a grant-funded position elsewhere, we wouldn't turn the money down.
We don't have grant positions. We don't have anybody.
But other towns do.
Do they?
I mean, I worked for the state of West Virginia in a grant-funded position from the CDC. I mean, they exist in government.
Yeah.
So it's essentially a grant for that position. And I mean, and the CDC never once, came and said, hey, this is what you have to do in your role because you're funded by the CDC.
Well, I guess
I was
my point
employed
is-
by WVDE.
My point is, they do a like contribution of $14,000 to the police department. That isn't expressed for an officer or half an officer. That's just a contribution they make. To me, it should be the same thing. If it's gonna make a contribution,
To the downtown
make it to the
budget.
downtown, function, not necessarily just for a salary. And maybe it's just, it's the wording of it, but it just
what it is.
comes across as Kathleen's beholden, half of her job is dependent upon the university's contribution. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. That's what it appears to be.
David says his hand raised.
Your mic is open, Davis.
Oh, hey, thank you, folks. When we first talked about the downtown development position, it wasn't necessarily intended to be an employee of the town. There's the possibility that it would be a downtown development committee and board that was independent of the town and the university. And it's just as we got into that a little bit further that it became, and I don't know that there was actually a point where that decision was made. Mark may remember it, the mayor may remember it, but I don't, that we decided that it would be a town employee versus being a downtown development commission, so to speak. If it was a downtown development commission, then Kathleen would be completely responsible to raise her own salary, like Emily was talking about, seeking grants and other funds. She'd have to name her own board, raise her expenses, everything related with the downtown. And you can do that with a downtown business tax, business development tax, business district tax, excuse me, BDT, and other things. So that's how it was. It just got its start, then it kind of moved its way into, but just like with the projects that you folks have talked about, the downtown position was looked at as something, and it doesn't necessarily has to be a person. It was looked at something, an action, a series of actions that would benefit both the town and the university. So like with the sidewalk project, like with other projects, it was a shared benefit and a shared cost, so to speak. I don't know how it necessarily morphed into being the position. I think it was just, here's what the position is going to cost. I don't know that there was ever any intention to say it's going to pay for salary and there's a link between those things. I think it was just, here's a contribution towards making that entity work in the downtown. So a little bit different than maybe us starting from the very beginning to hire an employee to work for the town of Elon to do the downtown development. The other thing I'll just mention real quick and try not to take too much of your time, but when I look at the estimates that Rich provided in his cost estimate, I think whether it's, and I'm going to be completely neutral on this, I don't care if it's the west side of town versus the east side of town, the university and the full-time residents of the town, whatever it happens to be. I don't think we ever want to be in, well, excuse me, shouldn't say that. I think we just want to be careful about one group of people subsidizing the activities of another group of people. As much as possible, you want the dollars to land where the expenses are being made or being incurred. If I look at this proposal, and like you all said, we're grateful that the university has offered this. And I'd use the term offered. It's not a contract. They're saying that they'll commit to it for 10 years. That doesn't mean that it can't be reviewed every other year or every 3 years. If there's an extraordinary set of circumstances, I think we could review it year by year. But it's something that's going to be justified and something that has bearing. The other side to what you folks have said, they are not obligated to give us a penny, but it would also affect our ability to do projects. If we looked at zoning a piece of property institutional versus keeping it commercial, knowing that it would or would not generate some tax revenue that would help us pay for the extension of the water line, we couldn't help but have to consider that as we made our decision. I just think that's fair. So again, I'm getting back to the point, it's not one side versus the other. It's where we mutually meet on projects, events, positions, expenses, whatever it is, where we meet together of those things is where we need to take a look at it and share the expense and share it equitably. It doesn't mean it has to be 50-50. It can be 80-20 or 40-60, whatever it happens to be. But to the way Rich started to analyze it, I think you break it down into the numbers and say, okay, the true cost of that overhead, salaries, benefits, everything is this amount. And so again, it's just, let's agree to work together where we need to work together.
Mr. Rodner, is any place you can go to find out what other small towns that have universities? Think of a High Point. Just ask.
Mr. White Mayor,
How
Mr. White,
relationship do they support?
I'm sorry, Mayor, Mr. White did a little bit of that, and he found that there were some university towns where, I think, unless I'm mistaken, there's one university town in North Carolina where they pay the equivalent of their tax value. I don't know if I think Mr. White still has a residence in town. So it's a possibility we could look back at his notes, Rich, or just give him a quick call and see if he's got that list and what he came up with. We actually had a gentleman from the University of Chapel Hill who sat on the board for the university. He's a developer in town. He came and talked to us. I wish I could remember the gentleman's name. He came and talked with us and talked about, as his position on the board, he went to the university and basically said, as a developer, there's some ways that you're just killing us out here. When you take a large, and thinking about Chapel Hill, when you take a large commercially viable piece of property completely off the market that could have generated X number of dollars in tax value, and it becomes zero-sum gain when it becomes part of the institution, then you're really having an effect. To be fair about it, you're having an effect. And I can see the gentleman. I can't remember his name, but he said he went to the board, and I think Chapel Hill has got an agreement now that when they take a piece of property off the tax rolls, they continue to pay the taxes. And I don't know if that's just the property or the improved piece of property. Roger, gosh, something of it. But in any case, that's what he said that he's got in place, that he put in place down in Chapel Hill, because he worked on the board, but he also was a developer and he had seen both sides. So just some food for thought there.
That was some good food.
It was a 3-course meal, wasn't it? Sorry about that. I got a little carried away. I apologize.
You know, there are other ways that the university could also support the town. They do have a large green space in our downtown 8 blocks. That could be a park. They have some property that could be redeveloped into retail and housing and office space. So it would be nice to know what their plans are for some of those properties as well as we look at this.
And the other thing, excuse me for droning on again, but the ways in which the university benefits the towns are not tangible in most cases. Some of the things that Monty mentioned about bringing in performers, the facilities that they make available, the things that they do. If you did an economic study on what the impact of the university was on Elon, or on the entire county for that matter, most of the things that would chalk up on their side of the ledger are not hard and fast black and white items. It's not a dollar figure of $1,000 for this and $8,000 for that. It's intangible benefits in a lot of ways that they're bringing, and that's awfully tough to get your arms around and to quantify and put some sort of figure on. So it makes it difficult for them and for us, I think. So again, I like what Rich has done in terms of starting the conversation. I think we've got a good basis here for kind of delving a little deeper and with Jeff's involvement, which we really appreciate. I think we've got a good place to have some dialogue to get a little deeper into this and talk about it, and let them give their side, let us give our side, and just keep working on this. But we appreciate this first step, or this step, excuse me, I shouldn't call it a first step, but appreciate this step as a place to get started and start talking about it a little bit. And that is my final word.
Why don't we move to the town manager's report? Getting past my bedtime.
Real quickly, just as an employee of the town, as a resident of the town, as a volunteer in the town, I wanted to extend a thank you to all those folks who showed up a couple weeks ago to, as Mr. Geary noted, to break into groups to do some litter patrol through town. a chance to talk to some residents about what we were doing, and we're very appreciative of the efforts. And so I want to say thank you to everybody who turned out and everybody who organized that. For those of you who follow college basketball,
It's halftime.
some follow it more closely than others, apparently. Elon's men's basketball team is playing in the championship game of the CAA conference, and the winner goes to NCAA tournament. Meeting this week with Aldermen Green and Allison on the Budget Liaison Committee as we continue to move forward on our budget development. And starting today, Devin Jenkins is our newest police officer. He started today. He'll be sworn in tomorrow. And I don't know if anybody would remember, he served as an intern for the police department a couple different times in the past, and we're thrilled to have him back. That's all I got.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, to kind of segue on what Rich said, I want to thank both Emily and Quinn for kind of spearheading the cleanup. Thought that went really well, and I'm in favor of doing it, periodically. And again, there's residual effects from just getting together with our citizens, and I think the more that we have that to happen, we'll get more community involvement with other things too. So I think it's obviously the primary goal was to make our town cleaner, and that's obviously the main thing. But I think we see the other benefits as well from just fellowship and getting to know folks with the community. So kudos to you guys for starting that, and I think it's something that we can do for a while. That's all.
Thank you.
Mr. Allison?
Yeah, I can't add much to that, but other than, I think we hear so many bad stories about Elon students. I thought it was a good testament of what, students who really have a vision and appreciate their university and their town. It was a great opportunity for me to work with a couple of those, and I think they got a good perspective about what it is to be a good neighbor. And I think they appreciate it. Hopefully they go back and tell their colleagues and their classmates that, you got to get your act together. And I think Mr. Gary pointed that out today, and you're always going to have that cycle, but it is hope. There's hope there that the majority of those students, 95% of them, are great people. There's the 5 people the ones you hear about, and that's unfortunate. But so anytime you have a chance to be around those students, we should do that. Just like being out in the community. I got a lot of people that appreciated it, that we took the effort, and not that's the reason we did it. We just want people to know that we care about our community, so I appreciate that. Appreciate the newsletter. I did mention to Rich that it was great to see a picture of the finance department, but we didn't put their names in there. And I don't know if that was by your design or it was just an oversight, but I hope that we continue that type of effort where we highlight people who serve our community and as staff, and recognize those people, because they're the unsung heroes many times.
Ms. Sharp?
Thanks to Public Works for getting us the materials that we needed for our litter cleanup, and for also picking up our trash that they so graciously allowed us to just leave on street corners and easy, because those bags got heavy real fast. So huge thanks to them. Huge thanks to everyone for coming out. I too really enjoyed it. I had the pleasure of having Dr. Book in my group, members of SGA, one of the rare Elon University staff members who lives in the town of Elon, and her young son who goes to school with my daughter. So it was a really good, mix of people, and it was really good. And I really just enjoyed it. I too love any opportunity to get with our community and just, talk. We didn't talk anything about necessarily like our wishes for the town or anything like that. Just got to know each other, and I think that's a really great opportunity. I would also say that it is not just students who litter. I have just in the last probably 10 days, seen multiple residents litter. And multiple residents, actually one student or appeared to be a student, and two appeared not to be students, not pick up after their dog. So just a reminder to please pick up after your dog. And just because you get a bag out and wait until the car drives by and pretend like you're going to pick it up does not mean that people don't see you not pick it up. Saw that twice. And so I did talk to Kathleen, and actually Quinn and I both, Quinn drove by as I was walking with Kathleen, talking about some pet pickup stations throughout town. And I also mentioned to Kathleen that we don't really have a lot of trash cans near our sidewalk. So for example, if, well, I'll give one example. So I walk my dog who poops from my house to downtown, and I have to carry the poop bag all the way from my neighborhood where he likes to poop, all the way to downtown before I reach a trash can. So that could be a reason why no one picks up after their dog, or why trash gets deposited on the side of a sidewalk, is because there's no trash cans. So, you know, more trash cans, at least where we have sidewalks and street corners where there's sidewalks, I think would be beneficial. Also, I reached out to Senator Galey and Representative Riddell about the Safe Routes to Schools grant. I've had several parents of Elon elementary students talk about the fact that there is no sidewalk that connects the neighborhood up there just beyond the elementary school to Walker Road. And in other states, the Safe Routes to Schools grant, which is a federal program through the Department of Transportation, those funds are used specifically for sidewalks and infrastructure so that kids can get safely from school, from their home to school and back without getting in a vehicle. Our state decided that those funds could not be used for infrastructure projects. So I did reach out to them. I also contacted Elon Elementary's PTO to get them on this topic, but I would encourage everyone to take a look at that, because that's a huge loss for our state when there's federal funds that are really designed for that the state did make the decision that, oh, we're not going to use that for infrastructure. So essentially all they're using it for is like education. Well, you can educate a kid how to ride their bicycle safely to school, but if you don't have the infrastructure, how do they actually accomplish that? So I would encourage everyone to reach out on that topic. I already mentioned the sustainability. I have lots of notes, as you all can see, so sorry. The sustainability committee that we did discuss, this was under Mr. White, about, you know, with our state committed to government sustainability by 2050, and I know Davis might have some information on that too. At the federal level, 2050 is also being discussed. So looking at how does the town like Elon afford these things, and how can we start to make those, go ahead and start to take those smaller actions to prepare for when something bigger might need to take place. And I think that's it for my notes.
I just echo everybody else's sentiments about the community cleanup. It was really nice. I had mostly SGA with me. I had the president with me in my group, and when we talked quite a bit, he was very interested in how we can mend this bond of student and town. So it was really nice to see that, and he was also speaking, so they redid their constitution, so coming into next year, they're going to have a new position of an outreach chair for SGA, And their main goal and one of their responsibilities is to be in touch with all of us, all the town aldermen. So having that connection will just help. And I think it opened a lot of their eyes, just picking up after their fellow peers and the community and being with the community, picking it up. You know, I had my wife and daughter with me picking up trash besides students. So it was just nice to see that. I also met with some of the SGA members afterwards on some coffee dates, and they were also still trying to ponder what they could do. You know, one idea was pitched is, you know, maybe SGA sponsors one of the flower pots out there or something of that nature. Maybe they send out help facilitate newsletters from the events to our residents, because we talk about that, and I think we've brought it up before. What can the university give us, or what can we give the university? But we also failed to mention, and I think I talked about it during our retreat, you know, going to see D1 soccer or the jazz orchestra. Well, you know, I was walking my daughter yesterday. I wasn't like a dog. My daughter and I were walking around the block yesterday, and one of my neighbors, she stopped to talk to me, and she was like, I really enjoyed your newsletters, the town newsletters. And I was like, people read those things? But she's like, yeah, I love having the tangible thing in my hand. I don't have to go to the website, and it lets me know what's up to date. So, you know, if the SGA gets on board with sending out a newsletter from the university to our residents, I think that'll help mend that bond of, you know, the university controlling town or what have you. I already mentioned earlier, there's a COVID question and answer panelist that the Elon First Baptist, Mr. James Wilkes and his crew are holding tomorrow. You can check that out. Looks like it can answer a lot of questions for you. But other than that, looking forward to revisiting the declaration in 2 weeks, and then would that also with that determine if we're going back to twice a week meetings or
That's
twice a month meetings?
I mean, that was made as a decision of the board that until things calm down, maybe once a month made more sense. You know, that's entirely up to you folks when you want to do that. That can certainly be part of the discussion, though.
Okay. I think that would be neat to have. And I received a few emails from some constituents earlier this month, just talking about the LGBTQ non-discrimination ordinance. And I just encourage my colleagues on their own to independently just look at what that is, what that entails. You know, it's going through on a state and federal level now. I just want to acknowledge them that I saw your emails and I hear you.
Thank you. Ms. Montgomery?
Yes, sir. Mayor, I don't have anything to add. Folks have done a great job of covering all the subjects that I might have mentioned. So thank you.
And just an update, Elon's losing at halftime. If they should win, it'll be the first conference title they've won since 1971. And the last time they were in the national playoffs was in 1956. So this will be a great accomplishment. The good thing about them, over the last 8 games, they've been playing well, and they've been behind about the last 3 games, and they came back and won all 3 of them. So I feel good about that and wish them the best. Nothing else, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Got that motion, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
I do too. I also need to stop eating candy for dinner when I show up here.